Okay, this is Unit 2.3, Biology. We're talking about transportation of materials through a cell membrane. But we're going to start with metabolic pathway. So metabolic pathway is a process in our body. For example, like respiration. It's an example of metabolic pathway that takes in many steps to complete. Here I have a reaction, a metabolic pathway that takes one, two, three reactions to get to the final product. But in reality, reactions like respiration, we only write it out as sugar plus oxygen turns into ATP and water and carbon dioxide. We write that out in one step, but in reality, it's like a 20-step long, very complicated process. Well, this is a simplified metabolic pathway. So to start, we have a reactant. And we know that reactions are usually facilitated by enzymes in our body to make it quicker, to lower the activation energy for the reaction to happen more easily. And we know that enzymes work by having its, its active site complementary to the shape of its substrate. So one enzyme usually only fits one specific substrate and vice versa. So we're going to have one enzyme for this substance, and after the reaction, because the reaction has happened, this product is going to have a different 3D shape. So we're going to have now for the second reaction, we're going to have a different enzyme for this substance because it has a different shape. And then after the second reaction, same thing happens. We're going to have a third enzyme for this substance to to for another reaction to happen. Question: why do you want to split a process into many complicated, seemingly unnecessary steps? Well, because that after each step, after each reaction, energy is released in the form of heat. So we're going to have heat going up, right? Heat rising up, heat rising up. Just a small amount of heat getting released as the result of this reaction. And if we do this in one quick step, if we can somehow break up sugar and respirate using the sugar in one single step, think about it. A lot of heat is going to get released in one step in a very short amount of time. And our body doesn't like quick changes. Our body likes constant, slowly changing, constant internal temperature, constant internal environment. It doesn't like fast changing environment. So this is good for our body. Okay. Now after getting through this, I'm gonna be talking about actual diffusion. So diffusion, the first thing we're going to have is cell membrane. I'm just going to be lazy. I'm just going to draw actually six phospholipids and one channel protein. You know what they are? Phospholipid and channel protein. Okay, okay. So diffusion. Diffusion is basically when substances diffuse through the semi-permeable cell membrane from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration. So let's say we have like 10 whatever it is, substances here, right? 10 substances over on the outside, and we only have one on the inside. There's a higher concentration of this particular substance on the outside of the cell than on the inside of the cell. This creates a concentration gradient. So we represent our concentration gradient like this. Suppose in the middle we have the cell membrane, and this is the outside, so outside, and on the right we have the inside, so inside. And on the outside we have many substances, so it's going to start from a high place, and on the inside we have one, so it's going to be a lot lower. and we draw a line between these two, you see it's going down. That means it's the diffusion is going to go from the outside to the inside, and over time, all these substances on the outside are going to diffuse inwards until they reach equilibrium, which means they even out. Now there is also diffusion of water. So we can have water molecules on the outside and very few water molecules on the inside somehow, somehow. Yeah. And water is going to diffuse through the membrane. It's going to be a slow process, but it's doable. Water does diffuse through the membrane, and diffusion of water works in the same way down the concentration gradient. And over time, all the water is going to diffuse in and maybe make the cell bigger, you know, until they reach equilibrium and there is no net movement of water anymore. Now, another type, these are passive transport, which means these are transportations of materials that doesn't require ATP energy. There is actually another type of transport called active transport. Now, by the name, you can guess that this is transportation that requires ATP energy, adenosine triphosphate. And these include like the pump, the same channel protein, and on either sides there are phospholipids. Suppose there are actually lots more substances on the outside of the cell than on the inside of the cell, but the cell wants to get rid of these substances. So it's going to use a pump to pump these things out against the concentration gradient. And this uses ATP. Now, another type is exocytosis and endocytosis. These occur when the substances that are being transported are too large to go through the protein or the cell membrane. So what's going to happen is, let's say, exocytosis. This is step 1, and in the middle, step 2. Actually, step 2 is going to be like this, and step 3 will be like that. Now, as we can tell, there's a progress being made. So first step, let's say this is waste, right? Cell waste. The cell wants to get rid of the waste, and the waste is packaged in a vesicle. This vesicle is traveling out, right? Traveling toward the cell membrane. And in the middle, we have a binding actually fusing with the cell membrane. So it's exiting the cell membrane, but it's kind of it's doing it like fusing with it. So it's getting out. And the third step is we see that the cell membrane isn't broken. The cell membrane is pretty complete. And then on the outside is a vesicle containing the same waste. So now this waste is get rid of out of the cell. It's out. So this example is called exocytosis. We can also have endocytosis. Now, endocytosis is literally the reverse of this process. You just replace the order. So exocytosis 1, 2, 3. Endocytosis 1, 2, 3. For example, something on the outside of the cell, let's say nutrient. Nutrient on the outside of the cell is in a vesicle, it's packaged in a vesicle. What it does is it comes towards the cell membrane and diffuses into the cell membrane. And now actually it forms a vesicle inside the cell. It fuses with the cell membrane and becomes a vesicle in the cell. So that's exocytosis and endocytosis. And that's basically all the types of transport a cell can do. Pretty cool stuff.